We're here at Breitbart, Texas today in the heart of the 90,000 acres that's at stake here. This 140 acres owned by Tommy Henderson here was part of that original lawsuit decision that now they're trying to use as a precedent. We're with Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst and Texas Land Commissioner Jerry Patterson. Welcome all of you to Breitbart, Texas, and we're glad to be here talking to you about this issue. So, you need to get that. Okay. So, we just wrapped up a meeting where you guys laid out your case. You had a lot of support from the Texas legislature was here, and certainly the governor and the commissioner came up, and actually had a couple of guys from the Bureau of Land Management come up as well. Tell us what your thoughts are about today's meeting and how that went.
Well, I think today's meeting was a great meeting. It was informational, it was educational. That's what it's meant to be, is to educate not only the public, but our landowners, and also our legislature, our elected officials, and people, because you can't fight a fight if you don't know what you're fighting and what the history is. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult to understand the issues if you haven't walked on this ground. You can read all about it, you can look at the maps and all that, but until you're here and visually see what's happened, it's hard to comprehend. And I think everybody has a lot more comprehension of what occurred.
And Governor, you've had a lot of interest in this for a very long time as the former chairman of the Texas-Oklahoma Pact, that Red River Pact that that kind of, we thought, settled all of this issue. So,
I thought so too, the Red River Compact.
Now, where are we on this issue? What are we going to have to do from here?
Well, first of all, Tommy Henderson got screwed 30 years ago. We're standing on ground that his family has owned for many, many years. The original title was issued, you said?
1905.
Well,
or the original was 1863. It was patented.
1863, this land was patented and sold to the predecessors who owned this, and then his own family took possession of this land right here that we're standing on and all those acres behind us in 1905. And this land right here, the river is a mile away, a little bit over a mile away. And so it's ridiculous. This is ridiculous. My understanding from what we had agreed in the Red River Compact was that the jurisdiction line was the southern line of vegetation. And that's going to be over a mile this way.
There's lots of vegetation.
There's a lot of vegetation over there. All right. And so what I think is going to happen, we're going to have to see quickly if the BLM will do what they say, and that is put out a plan and then see if it's reasonable, because Tommy wants to buy his land back, and I don't think he should have to pay for it because it was taken wrongly from him, but he wants to get his land back. And all these private property owners want their land. They don't want any controversy because it hurts the value of their land, and that's not right. And so what I'm going to do is recommend that the state of Texas file a lawsuit, either for a declarative judgment that these landowners own their land. If not, we'll go to court to protect private property rights in Texas.
And we'll have to do that in federal court.
That's right.
We're dealing with the BLM. Commissioner, you had a long conversation with Paul McGuire from the BLM today. Did you learn anything new from him?
Well, I did learn something. I learned something about what's called a federal statute called color of title, which provides possibly some relief. Although Mr. Henderson tells me he tried to avail himself of that about 30 years ago without success.
1985.
He's still waiting for an answer. And I also learned the complexity of it. We're standing right here. We're in Oklahoma. And then right up there.
We haven't crossed the river.
Yeah, we haven't crossed the river. Right up there is a little rise, which was the cut bank of the river, or either the riverbed at one time. It is a very complex issue, and it goes back to things that occurred in 1803 and 1819 and 1908 and 1924, and so it's complicated. But then again, how can it be complicated when this gentleman, who paid taxes, had title, lost his land in a litigation that, the BLM wasn't involved in. They weren't even a party to. It was a dispute between landowner in Oklahoma and landowner here. I mean, so something's wrong, and we need to fix it. And I agree with the governor. The way to fix that is to quickly lay down a marker in the court and say, you're not going to take anything without going through a whole lot of steps along the way. And I think that's what we're going to do.
Now, Tommy, this land, this doesn't look like riverbank land to me. I mean, you've grown cotton on this land.
I grew cotton here in the 1980s
And
made 2-bale cotton,
that
dry land.
that that just doesn't seem. None of this seems right, and none of it seems real. And yet, fortunately, we've been able to get enough light shown on this to where there's going to be action taken now, and we hope it works out positively for you. So,
Amen.
tell us a little bit more about the history of this land and how long it's been in your family.
My great-great-grandfather bought this place in 1905. They made the agreement in 1904, but it was finalized in 1905. He bought it, paid for it. Then it passed on to my great-grandfather, and then it passed on to a great-aunt and uncle, his name was Mr. and Miss Jones, Roscoe Jones. And they had no children that really wanted to farm. They had moved to the town and had good jobs. And so to keep it in the family, they kind of like to do that. So they called me, contacted myself, and said, would you like to buy it? And I said, yes, sir, I'd love to. I'd love to own it. And so we made an agreement, borrowed a portion of the money from Farmers Home Administration and paid them, and went from there. And that was in 1979 when I bought it. Again, the deal was made in 79, it was closed in 80. It closed after the first year. And in 1984, I was sued.
By the
Oklahoma landowner, by Mr. Carrington on the other side of the river, sued us, claiming actually that this land was his land. Now, the United States was a party to the lawsuit, but he claimed that all the United States owned was about 20 or 30 feet right up here, and he owned all the rest of it. Well, Mr. Green, who was the attorney for the United States, actually sided with us, the Texas landowners, because it involved 4 different farms, or 4 different landowners is what the suit involved. So Mr. Green sided with the Texas landowners and said, no, that's not our land. The gradient boundary, the least qualified bank, the gradient boundary is the border. Now, the river today—
Which is a mile from here?
A mile from here. Now, when this was patented out in 1863 and surveyed, the river was slightly this side of where it is today, maybe 100 yards or so. So basically the same area. Now it eroded this way and took 60 years to erode where we are right now. Then it took 40 years to erode back out there. So it eroded in the 1920 up to where we are. By 1960 it's back where it is today. But their contention and the judge's contention was that it eroded on us, but it vaulted back that way. Even though it took 40 years.
40 years is, that's an overnight deal.
You know, it's an overnight avulsion. Plus, it wiped everything clean between here and there
Well,
when it went back.
avulsion's normally a flash flood.
Right.
Yeah.
It occurs overnight in a day.
And not
40
normally this
years.
kind of a geological condition either.
Absolutely.
You have very, very few avulsions in this alluvial type sandy soils. Avulsions are more typical in your tight clays.
Well, Governor, I want to thank you and Commissioner Patterson for coming out and standing up for private property rights out here. And Mr. Henderson, we're going to stay with this and watch what the federal government does on this and watch the state of Texas do what it's supposed to do.
Bob, let me just close by saying that I spent a lot of time on this issue, as Tommy knows, and during 1999 and 2000 I was the chairman of the Red River Commission, the Red River Compact. And I left that and signed the document for the state of Texas. You were there.
We were in Dallas when we did it.
Yeah, and I signed it believing that the boundary between Oklahoma and Texas would be the southern line of vegetation, which is 1.1 miles over in this direction. And I knew at the time that through erosion it could move,
Right.
but as it moved south, our boundary declined, your property line. But as it moved back, as it moved back, Tommy should have all this land.
Right.
This land is his land.
Movement was not the issue at the time. It was identification. And when we looked at it, we had to have something that was historical, which the vegetation line is very, very close to a gradient boundary that the
Right.
Supreme Court ruled in 1923. We can't change that. We didn't have the authority, nor did we want to change it. We want to say, yes, they were right. So historically, the vegetation line is very, 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 very close to gradient boundary. It's kind of like you get a gallon of milk and it says 1 gallon or 3.8 liters. No, it's not 3.8 liters, it's 3.785 liters or whatever.
It's close, but it's
So it's
not
very,
exact.
very close. So neither is the vegetation line and gradient boundary, but they're always together, very, very close.
Yeah.
So it had to be historical, and we talked about that. We talked about it had to be economical. You know, nature placed that vegetation line there. So it's not only historical, it's economical. It's practical, very practical aspect. It's also, movement was not the issue, it was identification.
Right.
We needed to be able to identify where our law enforcement officers were, where they had jurisdiction to.
Right.
Because before, if there was an incident here and Texas picked up the offenders, they claimed there's in Oklahoma and we couldn't, Clay County couldn't prosecute them. If Oklahoma picked them up, they claimed there's in Texas and Oklahoma couldn't prosecute them. Well, it very detailed, delineated, and Bill Abney with Mr. Dewhurst's help and us, if you read the compact, it very explicitly spells out what that vegetation line is and how consistent the vegetation has to be, how it is when it crosses the inlets of rivers, what's the sparse vegetation that doesn't count. I believe now, and if law enforcement picks up someone here, they can easily take a picture and say, you know, I caught you right here doing this, and any jury in the world can read the compact and know beyond a shadow of a doubt, without doubt, whether they were in Texas or if they was in Oklahoma. I think it's very much helped law enforcement from both sides, and it was very historical following the vegetation line and the gradient boundary.
Well, the concept that the BLM is going to manage this land is somewhat counterintuitive anyway, because they don't even have access to this land. You know, it's all landlocked in by private property. There's no way to get to it to manage it. So I think, as you said, we need to do the right thing and just return this land back to the property.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Commissioner, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here, Governor.
Well, in Texas, we believe in private property rights, and that's why we need to help not only Mr. Henderson, but all these other landowners.
Absolutely. Mr. Henderson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tommy?
Thank you, Mr. Dewhurst.
Good day.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
man. It was a
Thank
good
you,
day.
guys.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
All right, nobody got hurt.